right. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And if you've been watching for the past 30 minutes, you did get caught up with Jacob because he left us a gift, about a 30-minute video on the news, views, and reviews, I guess we would call it, of what's going on in the world through the biblical lens. And I hope you enjoy that. That was 30 minutes that Jacob recorded because he's on a plane right now, so he's not here with us. But we do have with us David Lister. David, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to see everybody today from Appleton, Wisconsin.
Oh, how is the weather there, David? Is it getting cooler there now?
It is. It's going to be 60s in the evenings and 70 to 80 in the day. So I have my blue jean jacket in my suitcase. Very glad to wear it.
Very beautiful. Well, say hello to all the brethren there in Appleton. It's been a while since you guys have had any conference there. I think you guys used to speak a lot there before.
Yeah, we used to do that.
Praise the Lord. All right. And down the freeway, not too far from here, suffering like many others here in California. Jay, how you doing, brother?
His mercy is new every morning when you're behind enemy lines in California.
That's right. That's right. So pray for us. We're on the other side. Welcome, Jay. Thanks for being with us. And of course, down under, not too different than California, although I would say maybe Canada is a little bit different than that. But all the way from Australia, Davey, how are you?
Doing pretty good, thanks. Good to be here.
Hey, good to have you on, brother. Very good. So praise the Lord for those who are watching and those who've been waiting. You guys have been on waiting for some time. I would play that video from Jacob, so that's awesome. And we praise the Lord for him and that he's going to be in Appleton this weekend. So keep him in prayer. He'll also be here in Southern California next weekend. So he'll be on Saturday and Sunday. And he'll be speaking at Community Church of the Vor with us, which the church that I pastor. It'll be a lot of fun having them Saturday and having them Sunday, and go on to the East Coast. And so praise the Lord for that. And those who've been waiting, you can go to Moriel.org and find more information about the meetings where Jacob's going to be. I think Saturdays at 10 a.m. here in Southern California, and then 10:30 on Sunday. 10 o'clock on Saturday, 10:30 on Sunday, for a normal Sunday service. So glad if you can make it. If you're in the area, we're glad to have you here. And anything on the podcast, Jay, you let us know where they can find it, because people really love the podcast, but where can they go and find it?
By far, the most people find it on Apple, but you can also find it on Amazon, Podchasers, also Spotify, and where any podcasts are, we usually are there as well. Tim does a great job to make sure that we have a variety of servers that you can download us on.
Amen. Well, praise the Lord for that. People do enjoy it. It's a wonderful way to communicate the gospel and communicate the messages that we have here. And of course, later on in the year, we're going to be in Down Under with Davey. David and myself will be traveling down to Australia and New Zealand. And Davey, what's anything new? Davey, Rosengreen, anything new on that part of our trip coming up? Anything we want to update? And also, if you can mention the email address if they have questions about the upcoming trip.
Okay, well, yeah, we finally got all the flights booked. We've still got a couple of venues just to get organized, but yeah, we'll be in Sydney November 4th and 5th. We'll be in Brisbane Monday, November 6th. We'll be in Perth on Wednesday, November 8th, and here in Ararat on the Friday. Melbourne, Saturday the 11th and 12th, and then in New Zealand from the 15th of November through to the 19th. Yep.
All
so
right.
If you have any questions or interested in attending, please email us at ccodaussnz@gmail.com. And we should be able to announce the schedule properly soon.
Very good. Thank you, Davey. And looking forward to being with you guys not too long from now, I guess in a few months. So praise the Lord for that. So I think that's all. We want to welcome those who are watching, those who will be watching later on different platforms, but for sure, those who watch on YouTube and those who watch on Facebook Live, we welcome you. And just to let you know that catching up will be on those particular platforms, but the backstage, which is the part of the episode, and we can talk about some more things that people don't like to talk about, and especially the tech overlords don't want us to talk about. Those specific topics will be not on Facebook or YouTube. That will be on the other platforms like Rumble, like Telegram, like Vimeo, like Memorial.tv, like our memorialtv.org, and RTN will be there. And that's going to be a fascinating topic today, as we will take questions and a great topic about Obama at the end. So that's going to be in Backstage. So if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook Live, unfortunately, we cannot be there on Backstage. So when that time comes, you'll be able to jump over to the other platforms, in which we've been growing and steadily having a great time there. So that's all that I need to say for the announcement. So praise God. Let's get caught up. In fact, David, we'll start with you. And now I'm going to tell you what we won't talk about today, because it's just not enough time. But we won't be talking about the Liberty safes, which is a big problem there with the safe codes in the FBI. Can't talk about that, although you can make a comment on it. Jimmy Buffett dies, and people are, consider that he was a great musician. I'm not sure about that, but I'll leave it up to you. And we won't be talking about the new mandates that may be coming. And Dr. Jill Biden from the White House said we needed it. We needed it because of the variant. And of course, even that a senator from Ohio, J.D. Vance, basically talked about try to pass the bill, the Breathe Air bill. Can you imagine? We need a bill that tells us that we have the right to breathe, in order for companies, federal government, and the airlines, of course, not to prohibit or discriminate against anybody that doesn't want to wear, let's say, a particular piece of clothing, a mask, over their faces, over their mouth, over their noses. And so they cannot prohibit you from services if you're not wearing one. So he tried to pass his bill. Unfortunately, the Democrats don't like that, and they do want the mandates to be here, and any restrictions that may be coming, I think they're telegraphing it, because they do not want this bill, and it's going to be a lot of punitive damages, I guess, or it's going to be very punitive, just probably worse than they were the last 3 years. And I don't know where this is going to go, but anyway, those are the things we can't talk about, but I thought they were very interesting. David, any thoughts on those things that we cannot talk about?
Well, certain company selling safes and giving the FBI and the ATF the back door to your safe, well, they're going to be the Bud Light, and people are tossing them. But Dr. Jill Biden, she had COVID plus all the boosters, and it seems like she got well after 2 or 3 days. So either one, the variant is not very strong, which many are saying it's not, or as one liberal news media guy put, thank God for the vaccines and the boosters. Yeah. So either one you want to believe.
So I thought it was interesting. Maybe the idea of more restrictions is going to be more draconian than they were the last 3 years. But
yeah, that's
my thought. But let's talk about something that's well, I think those two things were important, but this one, it is really a scenario where it encompasses quite a bit of things, and that is idealism meets realism. Mayor Eric Adams from New York, and I think Jacob's going to be in New York at some point this trip. And in New York City, I don't think he's going to be in New York City, but he might be. I think he will be. Yeah, I think he will be. Eric Adams reverses course. Yes. He says by letting migrants in at the rate of 10,000 per day, or per month, sorry, 10,000 per month, will destroy the city. This is the same guy who said last year, we welcome all. We are a sanctuary city. So come in, come all. Give us your poor, give us your hungry, give us all those things that the Statue of Liberty says, of course, completely out of context. And this is going to destroy New York, changing course. Other Democrats are saying this is not what we signed up for. David, is this a case where, well, you did ask for it, too late now? Are they having some kind of, crisis in terms of their conscience? Do they really not want this? But when you look back, I guess we can laugh about it, but it is really sad to see this for the people that suffer under it. What is your first take on this Democrats reversing course?
Well, I was waiting for him to break out the guitar and start singing. We don't want start singing. We don't want to be the sanctuary city, no more blues. So anyway, but it's typical of Democrats. They say they're all noble and we're going to do all this, but when it comes right down to actually putting their words into action, they're really hypocrites. They didn't want this, and they knew that they're far enough away from the border almost, and it's not going to affect them. So now they're singing the blues, and they've changed course. And Mr. Abbott, Governor Abbott, seems like a genius, having exported his problems elsewhere. But still, Texas, Arizona have gotten killed massively more than what New York has gotten.
Right.
Although it's interesting that New York got twice as much money recently, $175 million, if my memory's right, for their problem. And Arizona got less than half of that. And they've been under the assault in Arizona for much longer. So everybody's screaming the money blues, and they want more money for handling a problem that could be stopped by enforcing our borders.
Yeah, it is unreal, isn't it? So he says the city's under pressure, multiple issues from crime to, of course, a $12 billion deficit, and trying to scramble with the influx of it by providing them, with healthcare and clothing and money and hotels. Even Republicans. I didn't know the Republicans were still in New York, but I guess there's some.
There's a few.
Yeah.
Upstate New York.
It's like here, yeah. They're crying that this is what they said it would happen, right? But it's not only because we got to think about this. They've been shipping from the southern border up to New York, but they're also getting incredible amount of Arabs and West Africans coming through Canada into New York. So it is sort of a what he said. Well, actually, this is Representative Elise Stefanik. There are 76 different countries represented in the illegal immigration that's coming into New York. So I guess Kathy Hochul's got a big problem. New York's got a big problem, but this is bigger than New York, isn't it?
Yes. The even the Chinese are saying they're exporting or importing into our country Chinese troops ready to go whenever, to cause problems, everything. But between the terrorism and the amount of terrorists that are on the watch list has created a number that the FBI will never be able to track down. And these people can be doing internal damage, as I've said many times here before, death by 1,000 cuts to destroy America.
Right. I'm going to go to Jay real quick. Jay, this is bigger than just the U.S., isn't it? Because it is part of a larger scenario that we see around the world. And one of the ones that are, I guess you could say in the scope of who's causing this, because a lot of people will say, well, what's going on? What's going on in the third world, in these southern countries that is causing this? Open Society founder George Soros and his son Alex Soros, but especially Alex Soros, spoke saying that if we have a conservative president coming into the U.S., this will undermine the progress we've made in terms of our open society. And they're worried about let's say, a certain candidate on the Republican side this coming election, because it would endanger unity, he says. It would endanger unity in what they believe it would be the end of an open society. So sounds like he's, double talking and backtracking a lot of things. Can you interpret all of that Alex Soros is saying, and why he's so concerned about a change in the world system?
If Alex Soros is anything like his father, then he has bet against the dollar. And what this means for the long term is anytime you have unrestricted immigration into a country, you need to have services that pop up, like these NGOs, like these government administrations that basically make their living off of servicing these new immigrants.
Hmm.
So understand, it's a bankruptcy from without and from within, because first of all, the NGOs are the ones that are delivering the immigrants. And then the NGO has a handshake with the government because the government sits there, housing, medical, schooling, all of these benefits and all of these other things have to be administered to the disadvantaged, let's call it, at the expense of the nearly 500,000 homeless that are already here on the streets in America. Yeah. So my prediction, and I'm not saying that I'm 100% right here, is this is all to destroy first world nations, because again, how do the Soros make their money? They basically try to undermine the dollar or the currency of the country that they're targeting. Happened in England, happened in Romania, and I wouldn't be surprised if Soros was somehow involved with BRICS as well.
They're the money changers of today, aren't they? The money changers of today. And
yes, Soros almost bankrupted the UK betting against the pound.
That's right.
Yeah, nearly did. I think they wanted to imprison him for what he did. He kept talking about the Ukraine. So we'll talk about the Ukraine when we get to the war aspect of it. But he kept talking about the Ukraine, that they'll continue to support the foundations of the Ukraine. They're going to give more money to the Ukraine. I don't know if they're giving money or just taking money and just funneling it, but that's another story. And how they support Zelensky and all that, which I think it leads us to a lot of things that are going on in the Ukraine that we may not know or may not want to know. But one thing for sure is that they're big open societies, big on immigration, big on transporting families from one place to another, which he said that's happening in Ukraine. But here in the southern border, it's not just adults coming in, military age men, but it's also children. And recently, Jay, you brought up something this week that was really, really hard to see, but it was so true. We talked about it here in catching up for quite some time about child trafficking, how the U.S. is considered to be the largest trafficking of children because of all the problems that they're having at the southern border. They take them up to Child Protective Services here in the States, and then the children go missing. These are countless stories and articles, and then they go away after a while because the media won't cover it. But I think we got a video. Let's watch the video first, because we have a whistleblower that came forward and said, hey, this is happening at the southern border. He's actually an immigration contractor, Carlos Arellano, and he was recently interviewed. So we'll play that video, and then Jay, you can fill in a little bit more and kind of unpack it for us.
Sure.
There we go. Yep, that's the video.
Well, the United States is the largest trafficker of children in the world. Wealthy Americans used as sex slaves, and worse, if you can imagine worse than that. It's happening, and the corporate media, of course, is largely ignoring the story for whatever reason. They refuse to touch the story, and when they do, they briefly touch it, and then it disappears. You can't find links on their website. It vanishes very mysteriously when they cover these stories. A whistleblower who worked at one of these facilities, MVM is the name of the facility, has come forward to expose all of this. Carlos Arellano is a former U.S. immigration contractor, and he joins us now. Carlos, before we dive into some more specifics of this, can you just give us, our audience, a background as to what exactly you did working as an immigration contractor and this company? Is it a government company relationship as a U.S. government contractor, or was it separate from the U.S. government?
So the way it works is the U.S. government is washing their hands, keeping their hands clean by going out and handing out massive contracts to organizations that they like to call NGOs, non-government organizations. And these NGOs, they will get contracts for food services, for laundry services, for educational services for the illegal immigrants. everything under the sun that you can think of, everything that we have to pay for, they will hand out $100 million contracts to give these services for free to the illegal immigrants. And the company that I work for specifically, their job is they hold the largest contract to move children around the United States of America. So my job was to move children from point A to point B. And my job was to pick children up at the border and then move them to their sponsors. I've been to every state that you could name. I've been there. I've been to North Dakota, Vermont, Florida, dropping kids off, all of them. And New York City and Florida, the most popular ones.
So let's get back to the children in the facility we featured here, this former Walmart facility in Brownsville, Texas. You work there, correct?
So my job was, I did work there, but my job was to take kids out of those facilities and hand them off to sponsors across the country.
So when you, can you walk me through that process? So you're an employee, you get what do you get, an email? Do you get a text message that says, Carlos, on Tuesday, we need you to take these children to their sponsor family in Florida? And how did that process unfold? Can you explain that?
So yes, we would get text messages, we would get phone calls at 7 p.m. at night, 6 p.m. at night, saying, hey, we have a trip out tomorrow. Can you make the trip? I say yes. And later on in the night, I get a report time for the following morning. You get a 5 a.m. report time, 4 a.m. It's always in the dark because they don't want us picking up these kids in the day where people can see us. And I would get for example, hey, 4 a.m. And I would not find out where I was going until the following day when I would show up to the charter bus. We would get phones given to us, backpacks given to us, and until we got to the shelter, to the Walmart shelters that you broke on your show, we get files saying, hey, you're going to head off to Orlando, Florida, you're going to head off to Los Angeles, you're going to head off to Nashville, Tennessee, and you're dropping off 6 kids, and in those files you get a hard copy of an ID of the sponsor who's waiting for you at the airport in baggage claim.
So to finish up kind of where he's at, they will meet their sponsor at the baggage claim, and then they have to match the ID according to what is on the hard copy. And he went on, and I highly suggest you find that interview, that almost 80% of the time, it's not the person on the hard copy. It's somebody else that's there in lieu, a personal assistant, a friend, picking up these kids. And half the time, these kids are crying, are very distraught, because they'll say, I don't know this person you're taking me to. He's not my uncle. He's not my cousin. And this is another aspect that we need to take into consideration. So these NGOs, they're telling kids on the other side of the border, walk 400 steps and then turn right, and you'll be at the facility that'll give you food, that'll give you clothing, that'll give you all the services you need.
Wow.
So they're coordinated. These are the coyote. There has to be some kind of coordination between these NGOs, like Open Borders, the coyotes, and then also these government facilities, because they're all working in tandem together to deliver these kids across the United States. And again, there is no DNA identification of these children.
No.
And there's no DNA test of who these kids are being dropped off with. So what does that lead to? In my opinion, that leads to massive child trafficking around the country.
Wow. David Lister, any thought on this? I mean, we've talked about it. Remember, we even showed a couple of ladies, that really brave ladies that went before Congress, and actually at a hearing in Congress, they actually reported all this, and they actually literally said the same thing, that the U.S. has become the most complicit nation, the largest trafficker of children in the world. And I think one of them was a believer, and I think the Dems were trying to divert her from that topic to the J6 topic. But this is, again, I don't cease to be amazed how far this goes. But your thoughts on the whistleblower and what's going on with the children at the southern border, which I would say maybe the same thing in the northern border, but we don't know to the exact number, but we do know more about the southern border.
Yeah, before I go to the border, if you remember some time back when Trump was president, he was requiring DNA. He was requiring match up to these kids. But what did the media do? The media was crying, oh, these kids are in jail. They're in prison. They're being locked up like this. And it's horrible. And they sued and they went after him and everything. And now the media, the same kids, more kids are coming through, and they're disappearing, and the media is complicit and silent. And it's shameful, shameful. The same cages are being used, the same thing, but because the kids are being moved without any trail or DNA or anything, and they're disappearing. It's shocking beyond belief, the abuse that's going on of children, and nobody's saying anything. They don't want to. But coming up, these people are brave for saying this.
Yeah.
They're very brave, and they know it's wrong. And these women, testifying, but just look, nobody cares. They're just kids, and look, America doesn't care about kids in the womb. Now they don't care about children. And it's shameful to us, and the judgment of God is on our nation. So God bless the whistleblowers. And this guy, it seems like he's had a crisis of conscience here, to actually be able to expose it, and he's maybe made himself. But when you have such a large organization that is involved with the criminal element, government levels, liberal, progressive movements, all working together, doesn't matter if you expose the truth. We're too big, to be touched. That's the type of philosophy that's happening to these, with the cartels working. It's all about money. It's all about the money, moving the money around every which way.
To your point, David, he later in the interview goes on to say that some of the people who are employed with this company are in their late teens, early 20s, and they're being flown to, say, Los Angeles or to New York, and they want to party because you don't have to return till the next day. So they give you that full day after you drop off the kids. So they're telling them that, yeah, I just dropped off the kid with whoever showed up because I wanted to go to a club that night, or I wanted to go to a concert. I had plans with some people that I was meeting in that city. That's how callous some of the employees of this company are.
Yeah.
And to your point, David, this is not like a small company.
No.
Logistically speaking, there has to be thousands and thousands of employees. And the more that actually have that crisis of conscience and become whistleblowers, that's the only way that something like this, that is this entrenched, this rooted down in our country, even to our government, can even start to be destroyed.
Yeah. And we know from Paul talks about in the book of Timothy how men in the last days will have no shame. They'll have no conscience. They'll be uncontrollable in their own actions and going and creating just all sorts of evil upon the earth. And we're seeing these being fulfilled today. Nobody has a conscience. They've killed their conscience, or they've been turned over to their sin.
No, absolutely right. If you look through history, and I think this is a point to be noted, it was Christianity that really changed the way people looked at children as not just sacrificial fodder or a useful tool for sexual pleasure and things like that. They actually brought, the meaning of what life was supposed to be about, the innocence of children and the love for children because of Christ. Christ said, "Let the little children come unto me." He forbid those who were keeping the children away. He condemned those who would make them stumble. And so all throughout Christianity, and when Christianity really took place in the Roman Empire, because many children at the time, if you look back at church history, even Roman history, they were simply sex slaves. A lot of them were just slaves. A lot of them were used for sacrifices. Going back to the Canaanite religion and how God told the Jews not to do that, not to go along with it. And even the Jews who were supposed to uphold the right of children and love them and bring them up, according to Deuteronomy 6, the Shema, they participated in the same things by killing their children. But it was Christianity in the first century who brought that in everywhere it went, Christianity brought the worth of women, the worth of children. The slavery stopped, especially with children. The work conditions stopped because of Christianity influence. But now that that's gone away, the vacuum fills, and the same kind of sins and the same kind of cruelty against children began again.
We're seeing the Roman Empire and the Greek Empire and what they did, that they had no mercy on anybody. If mercy was seen as a weakness, and now we're seeing that same thing. So no conscience.
There's a hypocrisy as well.
Hypocrisy, yes, absolutely.
Because the Romans used child sacrifice as a pretext to fight Carthage. They saw the Carthaginians sacrificing their children, and they were like, "Oh, these people are despicable. We need to destroy them." At the same time, the Romans are enslaving children and using them for all sorts of things, but sacrificing the kids, that's a line too far for the Romans.
Yeah.
It was actually Christians in the first century who would adopt these children, bring them in. I mean, majority of Christians in the first century were slaves, and a lot of them were children. And it was the parents who adopted them and brought them up in the ways of the Lord. That's what you saw, a growth of the Christian faith in the Roman Empire, because simply they love children. I think there is an important lesson there for believers to do that. Not only loving our own children, but loving children in general, and
yes,
bringing them up in the ways of the Lord. Obviously, they don't even allow Christians to go and teach kids anymore in public schools and places like that. But where you can and how you can do that and bring up children in the will, that's their only hope that they have in this cruel and dark world in which they're living in. And I see children, not only my children's friends and people connected to my family, but you have compassion in them because you see that their future is going to be very much darkened, and how these world organizations look at children as simply commodity. I think the book of Revelation speaks of that when it speaks of Babylon the Great. Humans are slaves, basically. They use humanity as a commodity, and they trade it, and it's no big deal if you lose a few.
Yeah,
no big deal if you lose a few. Now, when the context of Alex Soros and George Soros, they brought up Ukraine. There's a lot of stuff going on in Ukraine that is probably all involved with the Soroses anyway. And now that we've mentioned his name, this video might be flagged. Nonetheless, the Ukraine war, in which a lot of money's going in there, and David, we'll start with you. Ukrainian security chief said, if you think World War III hasn't started, you are gravely mistaken. It's already started, but it's not the only place. You look at places like Niger in Africa and other places in Africa that is being destabilized right now. This war in Ukraine is one of many that are being, I say being used, but it is already destabilizing the whole world. Western Africa with Niger, with Ghana and other countries that provide a lot of resources to the Western countries, things like uranium and gold. They don't want to be under the Western power like France anymore. And they're going to the East. They're going to Russia. They're going to China, and they're saying, help us. And there's a military coup in Niger. There's military coup in different kind of French colonies. But that's only the beginning. So we'll start there. Why Africa, in your opinion, seems to be one of their favorite targets right now?
Well, Africa is rich in mineral resources and commodities. Russia has lots of oil, lots of energy. So you can build a country on cheap energy. So trade one mineral for oil, and then you can build your country up. So the money is always at the root, or the love of money is at the root of all evil. And so we see that. And also they say that the West is exploiting them. Sure, but the next taskmaster is going to be even worse, either Russia or China. So don't think that they're going to get away with it, because while America has laws that you can't bribe government officials in other countries, China, countries like this have no such qualms about not bribing the right people to get the right resources and making the few wealthy and hurting the poor even more. So it all comes down to money and power. And Africa, commodities, but they have lots of people to trade, lots of people for doing work very, very cheaply, just for the cost of food for a day. So that'll be important, to be able to exploit the mines and everything else. So that's what they're good for, not for in a Christian's economy, but for in a corrupt world's economy.
I recently made a video about world's population declining, and it focused on China, but we mentioned that Africa, the population is not declining. The rest of the world is declining. Africa, I think Niger has had 7 children per woman. And I think other countries, I think Botswana, it's 5, but Niger is one of the largest ones. So there's a lot of population, a lot of death, of course, a lot of infant mortality. But it's not like the West, which is like 1.6. The replacement rate is 1.6, which you'll need 2 to stabilize it. Africa's way over that. And so what do they want? And to your point, David, they need resources. Well, Africa is rich in a lot of resources, minerals, including people.
Human labor.
Yeah, exactly. You got
cheap
it. 100%.
Cheap
human labor. Yeah.
Labor.
Yeah, I watched this. Jay, I don't know if you ever watched those documentaries on cobalt, but cobalt is obviously material that is in Africa. It's quite abundantly, but to get it is very difficult. So they need these children to go into these mines, and cobalt poisoning is a very real thing. But also the mine collapses, children die. They work for $1, the equivalent of about $1 a day. These Chinese companies own these mines. They pay absolutely nothing. But in a world where they have nothing, $1 a day is quite a bit of money. Yeah, it's quite a bit of money.
It means the difference between eating and not eating.
You got it, 100%.
Correct.
So the instability of Africa is becoming an issue now, and so close to the Middle East, which we can talk about that as we go. But what about Ukraine, David? What about Ukraine and Russia? And is this? I brought it up here, and obviously we talked about it many times, and Jacob's brought it up many times about the situation in Russia and Ukraine. I don't want to go through the whole thing again on that, but the recent issues where Ukraine says this is now World War III. There's no end in sight. They blocked all the peace plans. I doubt that Ukraine will go to the peace tables with Russia again. So number of troops killed on both sides, it's over 500,000 already, according to U.S. officials on the conservative side. Zelensky keeps getting a lot of money. 24 more billion has been asked by the White House again, on top of the 113 committed over the past year. Are we ever going to see anything close to a peace deal, a truce, or anything like that?
The war has come to a stalemate. Ukraine is not able to make headway into removing Russia from their own, what they believe to be their own land.
Yes, you're right.
So they don't have enough firepower, enough men and forces to push them out. And Russia is just fighting a defensive war. Everybody is running out of ammunition, and everybody. And Russia is even having trouble with their ammunition keeping up. So they're hoping North Korea will come in and give them some ammunition. And even the threat, look, we're in a hot war. That's all there is to it right now. Right now, it's on a a level there in Ukraine that it's men against men, but soon it could be missiles fired towards nations. It could very well happen. As Russia, I believe a man like Putin, if he thinks he's not going to win, if he thinks that he's going to die and his country's going to die, well, like history and Mr. Hitler, and then of course in the Bible we see this type of mentality that the king of Syria talked about, that even though he was defeated, there was no way that they were going to win. They still thought they could win. They still think, and that's how the devil is. Even though he knows his defeat is coming, he still has self-deluded to believe that he can win. And it could very well be this type of possessed mentality that we've seen throughout history that types like Putin could be having. And so they won't care. And it could easily turn into a world war. But like it is basically a world war
already. Yeah.
Like we have Europe is funneling money, America's funneling money. Biden wants more money. He's asked for, I thought it was $113 million, which he's only spent half, but he wants 24 billion more. And where are the weapons going? When are they going to be delivered? Where is the money going? Is it just being shuffled around to some other place to make the other parts of the chaos work? It's very, there's no accountability for this money. There's none. It's just shove it over there. And now we, just like the COVID, all these billions upon billions and billions of dollars from all the nations through this money after COVID, they don't know where the hundreds of billions of dollars have disappeared to. The same thing is going on now with the war. And there's just, the world has gone mad. And where this is going to end, who knows? But I mean, I know as a Christian, we know where it's going to end. But rumors of wars, it's bound to happen, and it's going to get more intense. So,
I agree with you 100%, David, about good old Putin and his demonically possessed mindset of we can win.
Yeah.
But the biggest problem with this situation is it's not just Putin. Volodymyr Zelensky believes that he's going to get the Crimea back. He's going to get Donbass back, and he's going to be flying high, and just destroying the Russian bear. And what's worse is you have an insipid president that thinks that he can throw money at a problem and make it go away. At the same time, I'm sure that there's 10% of what he's throwing is going to the big guy.
I would not doubt it. Absolutely. There's not just one king of Assyria that's thinking it. You're right. It's many of these people think they can win. There seems to be some people in Europe that are starting to take a step back and say, hey, let's not do this. You going to bring that up there, Marco?
Yeah. We'll get to Orban, but I think he makes a really, really good point. I did want to mention the craziness of Zelensky with the money. We brought it up here many, many times, and we're no fan of Zelensky. And I would venture to say he's equally or worse than the guys we mentioned, because everybody thinks he's a good guy. But the reality of it is, Jay, you brought it up, David, you brought it up, the money that's going into, how many homes does this guy own? I mean, he owns quite a bit of property and real estate, and all he has to do is flee the coop one day, and then he's off in the good life, but obviously his sins will catch up to him. David, do you believe that Russia and all this melee going on headed to the Middle East, is this related to what people believe he's Gog and Magog is Russia, and he's drawing in like a centripetal force, drawing in these other nations in and into the Middle East? Obviously, we know God's doing it, as he says, jaws. But do you, as personally, obviously we don't know, and Jacob,
we don't know.
We don't know. But do you personally see this as a precursor? Being he's Gog. I mean, there's a lot of guys on the internet who say, no, this is it. Obviously, we don't dive into speculations like that. But could this be what you see a scenario where Gog and Magog comes in?
Well, certainly we can see all the chess pieces falling into place, not just on that scenario of Gog and Magog, but multiple other scenarios that Jesus said would happen, from buying and selling, from being able to control people to having famines. Everything that Jesus said in Matthew 24 is intensifying and coming more. And then what Ezekiel talks about and all these pieces, we know God sees the whole board, as it were, chessboard. He sees all the players, and they're not out of his control. And the devil is even a servant in his hand, just as Nebuchadnezzar was an anointed servant in his hand. So for us, we can have peace in the worst of times because we know our future and our destiny is sealed. And so, but what we're worried about, of course, is our family, our kids, our unsaved loved ones. This is the biggest concern. But all these scenarios that are going on, we don't know exactly how it's going to come out, other and in what time frame, but we know the birth pangs are getting stronger and harder and closer together. So the plan is coming together.
That's right. Now, Putin just moved his very real longest range new capable missile, combat duty, the Satan 2, otherwise known as the Sarmat, it's ICBM. It's ready to go, intercontinental ballistic missile, longest range Russia has. And it's capable of, the payload is capable of, pretty much getting rid of France. It's wiping out a country the size of France. It can reach London. It has, very big capabilities. It's spooking a lot of Western leaders, and it's causing people like Orban in Hungary to say, wait a minute, enough is enough. And Hungary's blocking NATO and aid to Ukraine through the EU. Touch on that real quick, David, and see where's he coming from?
Yeah. Didn't Putin also last week or so load a 200-ton bomb an enormous bomb, one of the biggest ordinances, onto a plane that has nuclear capability? I can't remember the exact tonnage, but I know it was like their biggest weapon. So he's obviously wants to rattle the world.
Oh, yeah.
He wants people to fear him.
Yeah.
And so for this gentleman from Bulgaria, right?
Hungary, Orban.
Hungary, yeah. From Hungary, he's doing what Turkey and Erdogan did before Erdogan got his jets and before everything he wanted to vote to let's bring Ukraine in. But now he's putting a stop to bringing Ukraine in. Yeah. He brought Finland, Sweden into the NATO. But if they know if Ukraine comes in and they're under attack under Article 5 of NATO, all of NATO has to go to their aid. And some people are starting to say, wait a minute, are we losing our mind? Are we slipping into a World War I, World War II scenario so quickly? And the answer is it could happen, but hopefully some people might wake up soon and say this has to stop them.
Yeah, Jay, Orban was at a Tucker Carlson interview, which is a really interesting interview. If you haven't seen it, it's on Twitter. I think it's known as X now, but it's Twitter. I call it Twitter because it's always been Twitter. Orban was there with Tucker, and he says, "Now this is his own words. I want you to comment on it. The only person that can stop the war and save the world is Donald Trump. Now call it what you will." People laugh about it. Okay, we can get the laughters out of the way. We have any canned laughter sound effect, right? But he was serious about it because he says, look, weak men make for hard times. And right now the U.S. is run by a weak man, not by a strong man. And the only strong man in the U.S. politically is Donald Trump. Is he right? What's your take on Orban? I mean, he's not a wishy-washy leader. He's never been known to be that. There's been probably a pretty good leader for them, call it what you may. But what's your take on it?
I think the reason why Orban says that is because I don't think Donald Trump takes directions from the same people that Biden does. Okay,
Yes.
So Biden is a good lapdog. He takes directions from Obama sitting in his sweaters in his basement. He takes whatever the intelligence community says. Oh, we gotta act on that. So you talk about a deep state swamp creature. I mean, Biden is the poster child for that. And that's why Viktor Orban is saying this, because here you have Trump, who obviously is a target in the crosshairs. We saw some diplomatic success with Trump during his presidency. First time that a U.S. president had ever gone to North Korea, actually had a rational discussion with the Hermit Kingdom, which is, again, what did it really accomplish? Well, it pushed us down the road a little bit from open war in the Korean Peninsula. In the end, I don't know if Donald Trump is necessarily the answer. I've been listening to some of the things that Vivek Ramaswamy has been saying. If he were to be a president here in this country, if we followed his foreign affairs plan, I think it'd be just as good as Trump. But Trump, I think, is the only one who has the power to unite the party, and I hate saying that.
Right, I understand what you're saying. Orban says, look, it's almost, I have a nation that borders Ukraine. This is his own word. I have a nation that borders Ukraine. So he's got a lot to lose. And I want to bring peace. And it says the only likely possible solution is Trump to be back in the White House. My question, Jay, is, Donald Trump is facing like 700 years if he gets indicted in all counts, 700 years behind bars. Is it even possible that we're looking at not just the J6, not just election interference, but a bigger play that we have to put Trump in prison because otherwise Alex Soros is not going to get his money on the wars and all the migration and all the destruction that's coming in because of a war? The globalists need to stop whoever gets in the way of peace. And for them, their view is Trump is the only one that can stop it.
Well, Trump is the only one who's actually said this would stop tomorrow. I'd be talking to Putin and I would be talking to Zelensky and bringing them together the very first day of my, presidential elect, after he wins the election. He's the only person that's talking about peace. Right. I mean, Orban's talking about peace. Yeah. But as far as our country, who else is talking about it? Is peace like even viable? Of course it is. But not when you're making money from it, and not when your entire grasp on power is based upon fear and chaos, which Democrats, excuse me, that's your like poster, that is your platform. That's your platform. So yes, Trump, unfortunately, I'm going to hold my nose and say Orban is right. He's the only one who could bring peace to this situation other than otherworldly intervention by God himself.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting.
A false peace by Antichrist.
Correct.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. What do you think, David, of his comments about Trump being the only one?
Well, it's certainly interesting, and it shows two dynamic views. The Democrats want to destroy. This guy wants to put him in power because I think he loves his country. I think he would like to have peace. He seems to have a sound mind. As for me, it's a rational mind. I prefer peace, but my whole life, our country has been at war. At least Donald Trump got us to a place where no wars. And the first time, I think, in my lifetime, we weren't at war. And so we could use it. If he can do it, it would be wonderful. Cut off the money to Ukraine, tell Putin we're going to cut the money off, cut the weapons off. You guys pull back. Let's get back to building resorts and making money. You know? Let's be capitalists. That's what he'll.
Yeah,
you know. But the New World Order doesn't want that. They, like George Soros, open border. They want a one world government where there is no border, and the destruction of nations and the destructions of governments and democracy, most of all.
Interesting. I was well, let me tell you this about Bulgaria, and then I'll tell you that some interesting, an article that I read was really interesting. Bulgaria is also having, because it's real close to Crimea, the people, it's not the government, the people are actually revolting, and they're having a big protest this weekend, demanding that they step down. The government steps down because they're in on the war. They're sending money through Bulgaria and weapons through Bulgaria to Ukraine. They don't want to be under the WHO. They don't want to be under the CBDC, the central bank digital currency. They want to abolish the WHO and any influence that they have there, and gender ideology in their kindergarten, in their schools. I think you mentioned that, David. What, they just want normal life? Yeah, that's illegal now. It's illegal because they're saying, well, if you go to these rallies, the government's not going to budge in on it, and they might arrest you. But are we seeing some countries, like you said, David, not only Hungary, but now Bulgaria, saying, the people at least, saying enough is enough. We don't want to participate in this new world system that you guys are putting in.
I think a lot of Americans would like to see this. I think a lot of countries, Canadians, and I think a lot of people would like this, but we're at a time where the government is not serving the people anymore. They're serving their own needs and power, and for greed and profit, and probably being possessed by Satan with the evil that's going on. I couldn't think of anything worse than what Jay talked about with what they're doing to kids, and of course, when I go to Thailand soon, God willing, that I see this trafficking of women, caught up in the sex trades, that get into the drugs, and then get into prison, in a cycle after cycle, and the preying on of people, of minority tribes fleeing their own persecution from their country and coming to Thailand, and then being bought and sold, and then into the sex trade. And it's a never-ending supply and things. And we're actually going to I think 5 prisons, and Scott has got some places for us to go next year to expand even more. And there's the women are looking for an escape, looking for something, and Scott is helping lead the way towards that. So please pray for Scott. Please pray for open doors there in Thailand, because the children here in America, the women in the Far East, Bangkok is a cesspool of sex trade, and the whole Far East. And so may God help us and to help in that respect. But yeah, the abuse of women and children throughout the world is just appalling.
Yeah, so we got a lot of things in play here with this wars and rumors of wars. Obviously, not counting on only Ukraine and Russia, but we're also counting the fact that there is going to be Chinese-Taiwan confrontation maybe sooner than later. Biden
Philippines is being dragged in.
Yeah, Biden committing to military aid to Taiwan. Now you got the Chinese government saying that you can't use an iPhone if you're a government official, an employee. You can't use an iPhone because they're spying on us. And they just unleashed their new Huawei. I think that's what they pronounced the new phone. That it's got lesser technology than the Apple phone. I think they use a 7 nanometer chip. I think iPhones uses a 4 nanometer chip. So they're catching up, no doubt. And all these internal wars, and then economic war is leading to a greater aggression into Taiwan. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, what can you make of this? Jay or David, either one of you can comment. you got one in the Middle East, Iran and Israel. You got one in Europe, in the middle of Europe, Ukraine and Russia, on the eastern side of Europe, I should say. And then you have the one in the South China Sea, plus in Africa, and then turmoil in the Western world. I mean, it is really difficult I guess, for people to wrap their head around this because it's not happening in their backyard. But as Christians, as we see the world and see other Christians suffering, this might be a very, very difficult time for Christians to really grasp what's going on. But it's an important time for Christians to pray and to seek Christ in this difficult age.
First of all, if I could go back real quickly to something you said, Marco, the Chinese are not allowing Apple products because Apple products have the NSA on it. It's funny you should mention that, because back when I first got my iPhone and I got Siri, I think it was on the 5, I asked Siri, "Are you a agent for the NSA?" And her answer was, "I'm sorry, I cannot answer that."
She took the fifth. Oh man. Oh,
Non-denial denial.
Denial. Yes. I can't even comment on that. To your point, though, we're seeing a conflagration of these military events in Ukraine. We're seeing a boiling point between the Philippines, Taiwan, and China, South China Sea. We're seeing, like you mentioned, in Africa, is starting to flame up. This is the death of Western colonialism.
Yes.
And now you're replacing it with Eastern colonialism, because let's face it, Russia is kind of the bridge between East and West. But really, most of the population, I believe, lives in the West. However, they are a West-East country.
Yes, they are.
And they're the most eastern point in Europe. And for a long time, the East has not been a colonial power, but China is really pushing the envelope. And, back to the story of, the kids that are in these cobalt mines, that you talk about an exploitation that, the Western democracies have spent years and years and years to get to the point where we no longer do this. We had this at the turn of the century during the Industrial Revolution. Child labor laws came in. China has had no such reformation, as it were, to their laws. So it's exploit. Russia is probably the same way as well.
Yeah. Human cruelty. Now we reached an hour mark, so I just wanted to just kind of reset the table real quick. I just want to let everybody know. First of all, thank you for watching. We're so blessed that we have this conversation here and catching up. And I know Jacob's not here, but we watched a little bit of Jacob first 30 minutes early on, and that will come out soon, of his own views on what's going on in the world. He's on a plane right now. But we are in different platforms. We're watching on YouTube, on Facebook Live, on Vimeo, on Telegram, and all these, Rumble and Memorial TV and memorial.tv.org. And you can avail yourself of that. But we're going to go to Backstage in a few minutes. And so come to Backstage. We won't be on YouTube or on Facebook Live. So you're going to have to leave those platforms and go to the other ones and watch Backstage. And we got some, I guess, salacious stuff about Obama that's come out. And we're going to be able to talk about that, and because I don't think they will be able to talk about it on these kinds of platforms. But I did want to let everybody know, and we thank you for watching, because there's a big implications on that specifically. Before we move on to the economy, David and Jay, have you guys heard this? This is an article that I read that it looks like, and call it conspiracy, call it not, but it is something that people are referring to, is the fact that there are powerful interest groups, call it for lack of a better term, globalists, who around the world are manufacturing or causing a tremendous problems in the world, to the point where they are causing an end of days kind of scenario in order to make Jesus to come to this world. And so this is an article that was written regarding the end of days. To force Jesus to come, you need a chaotic environment. And therefore, these globalist elites who, according to some, know what the scriptures say, are forcing these issues, are causing all this chaos in order to bring Jesus to earth. Obviously, we can laugh about it, we can chuckle at it, but the average person that doesn't know this and sees this or reads this or hears about it, could it be? But we want to settle the case here. Could it be that these people know the Bible and they're causing these tremendous problems in the world in order to force Jesus to come? Obviously, we have a different view on that, but David and Jay, you can comment on it in just a few minutes before we move on to the next topic.
Well, for me, when you have somebody that may not be believers, but they do know things about the Bible, most likely the one that they'll bring won't be Jesus, because he has his own schedule. But there is one that is working to come that most likely would be the one they're bringing to power. They're being used as a tool of AC.
Of Antichrist, absolutely.
Yeah.
Jay, what do you think? This is kind of an interesting scenario.
So I'll put on my tinfoil hat real quick and just talk a little bit about what I know. There's a group out there, I'm not going to name names, that believe exactly the inverse of what the Bible teaches. They believe that Jehovah and Jesus are the villains, and they believe that Lucifer is the light bringer, and they are trying to cause that conflict to come, and they're trying to mock the morality that Jehovah tried to give. And these people, they look at everything inversely. They are the to just kind of give you a wide swath. These are the Crowleyan Luciferians, and these are also other groups that have subscribed to this. And it's you can see these groups actively pushing their agenda. The fact that to this day in the UN we have a room that is dedicated, I can't remember, it's called the Lucius Trust.
Yes.
Take some time, look into it, and the fact that exists, that prayer room exists in the UN, should tell you all you need to know about the UN.
They actually have a rock that you can go and you can imagine any god, and you can pray to it and imagine any god in that rock. And so it has like a matte finish, so you can kind of look into the rock and imagine your own god in there. And it's a prayer room. Jay's absolutely right. That is an absolute fact. You can go there. It's not available to the public much, but it is there. People do use it, officials and sort of diplomats and all that stuff. So fascinating stuff. Very good stuff. David, did you have anything
on the Lucifer Trust?
Oh no, I thought you were going to say something.
No, I was just agreeing and listening to him, and I was just thinking about where we're at now in history.
Madame Blavatsky, I think that was.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Theosophical Society.
Yeah, they have a library there with their books and everything. And
where was she from, Jay? Do you remember?
I think she originally came from the same place that Tesla came from. I think it was like Yugoslavia, but she spent most of her time in the United States because she immigrated here quickly.
Yeah. She's actually from Ukraine.
Oh, Ukraine. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, Ukraine. Yeah. So you can kind of see where that's going to go, right? Coincidence? I think there's a lot of evil forces that are causing a lot of the trouble. But the interesting thing is that they think they're going to win. They think they got a one over on God. If we force this, he's got to come. But as David said, no, they're going to get a man of peace, but he's going to be a man of destruction who comes with peace on a white horse. And they think it's going to be Christ, but it's going to be an absolute disaster. It's going to be the Antichrist. So the last few minutes that we have, a couple of things. Economy. The economy is getting worse. Mad Max scenario, if you watch that movie, the conditions are getting worse all over the world. If you think it's in the US is bad, the rest of the world, the 2/3 of the rest of the world is having major starvation. As they say, if the US and the Western world is hungry or having economic issues or food issues, the rest of the world's starving. And that is true. and we see inflation rising in the West, the UK and the United States and the Western world. Inflation like many centuries haven't seen, maybe the Great Depression and maybe the late 70s. But real estate is a problem, food issues are a problem, desperation, so much so that is deteriorating all kinds of societies. Different cities are going into robbing, and in the light of day, they're robbing and using these flash mobs to go into stores. As the food cost is soaring, people don't have any money to pay, and so they're just stealing stuff in order to make money out of it. And in fact, California has been a big target of this, Philadelphia, Chicago, but Signal Hills, this one went all over the world. Signal Hills, the Home Depot there. And Jay, you don't live too far from there. $5,000 worth of stuff and power tools in about a minute. And I guess California is passing laws that you can't go after shoplifters, not that you just have to let them shoplift, but if you do intervene and try to intervene and stop them, you might be charged with the crime.
Correct.
And so anyway, lots of stuff. UN is calling for more, saying that there's going to be starvation all over the world because food is unavailable. The problems in rice, with rice in Vietnam, the Ukraine blockage. Jay, sort this out. There's so much, you can spend a whole day on this stuff. But any comments on just the topics that we talked about: the food inflation, the robberies, and the obviously grain crisis all over the world?
Well, we touched on this last episode, and I'm gonna just reinforce exactly what we went over, and then talk about something new. The reason why we have food shortages, the reason why we have inflation, is government intrusion in farming and government legislation on farmers. The fact that in Canada, we covered the story where they make you throw away milk so that they can artificially keep the price of milk high. Talk about something that is an affront to God, the complete waste of his bounty.
Yes.
Another story that we didn't get to, they had a Amish person that was raising cattle, and then the FDA came in and said, all this meat, because you slaughtered it, you can't do it. You need to throw it away. You can't touch it. You can't eat it. You can't give it away. The legislation they put on to regular farmers in the United States and in Holland, where they're reducing herds. They're reducing herds for pollution, supposedly, methane. Yeah. They're reducing farming, period. They are the cause. The governments of the world are the cause of the scarcity. They have overstepped their boundaries. And there is no solution because they want to pack everyone into cities where there is no arable land. The solution to a food crisis is have people cultivate their food and quit relying on the government's stamp of approval on food. And yet, for some crazy reason, we want to give them power over the food supply, which, by the way, would make us even more dependent on them.
Yeah. Sure. Any thoughts, David?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was on the plane to the seatmate. My seatmate was he was a supply line expert, and he was talking to people in Nashville, trying to sell them that, look, you need to rebuild your supply lines and your lines. And they say, well, we don't have money for this. And he says, well, if you don't rebuild your lines of supplies, then you won't have a business. And he was saying how bad the world has come since COVID, and the ability we have not near sourced, which he said is one of the problems. We should have been shifting out of China 15 years ago instead of now, and creating supply lines that are much easier to keep fulfilling our needs of production. But it's not, I mean, look, we know that worldwide famine is coming. I talked some time back about the rice supply in the East is down. So that's, like rice is a staple everywhere, from Vietnam to China to everywhere. So the food is breaking down. It's breaking down here. Now, while we have food in America, I would not be surprised if we don't start rationing certain supplies. In other words, you've got that little card you get your little discount on. Well, they're recording how much you buy each month. So I could well see you only buy 5 pounds of rice. You want to go out and buy 50. Sorry, you only get 5 pounds a month. They could start it kind of a benign way of doing it, since this is what you buy. But everything is coming unraveled, everything of capitalism, which Mr. Soros hates. So it's an attack on this, it's attack on our society, it's attack on our morals, it's attack on everything that is right from top to bottom, and to destroy people.
Yeah, no doubt. I recently just started on the book of Amos at our church on Wednesday nights, and it should have been written last week, because it's everything that Amos talked about, not only the how they treat each other, the cruelty toward humanity, but also of one another among the Jews, among Israelis, and the prices and the inflation and the wealth and the disparity and the poor. And everything was going into rituals and ceremonies, and a lot of money going into that, but they had no money for poor. And at the same time, they were expanding. Jeroboam II was expanding, and Amos called out his generation for their sin. And of course, he was talking about the day of the Lord that is coming. And so, wow, very fascinating. I wish I could read it too.
Is that verse in there that says they sleep on beds of ivory, but the kids starve? Yeah.
It talks about how the wives of this rich merchants made their husbands buy all kinds of goods, luxury goods that they didn't even need. Yeah. They wanted to panel their homes and all this stuff. And I guess paneling was a big deal back then, but that's paneled with ivory. And but Jay brought up in just final topic, Jay brought up the point of this climate change idea that it's causing a lot of the problems in the nations. You can't sow, you can't farm, you can't sow, you can't harvest, you can't do this, you can't do that, can't have cows. And this climate mafia continues to evolve. And this is a story right out of the UK. So if anybody's watching from the UK or will watch it later in the UK, you can attest to this. It's called the New Energy Bill, proposed by the Tory government, started with Boris Johnson a while back. Now it's accelerated. And basically, any Brit, any person in England can, or the UK, can be jailed for failing to comply with this net zero regulation. And what it is basically, if you read this 446-page monster, which I don't think anybody has, I don't even think the parliament has read it either. If they take a page out of Nancy Pelosi, we have to pass it before we read it. They're going to make everybody on smart meters. So your home needs to have a smart meter, and the mechanism to control the energy coming in and out of your house. And therefore, if you don't want to put a smart meter, the organization, aka the government, along with police, can come into your house and take away those appliances, replace them at your cost with new ones. Of course, you can see £15,000 for non-compliance, a fine of £15,000 for non-compliance, and up to a year in jail. So you go to the clink if you don't participate in this. And the new energy efficiency regulation proposed by, believe it or not, David, by the Conservative Party, not even the liberal Marxist leftist, Labor Party, which only will expand, I would imagine, if the Labor wins. So this is called the New Energy Bill, commitment to being carbon neutral by 2050. Take it away, David, then we'll go to Jay, and then we'll finish catching up, and then we'll move to Backstage.
Well, that's the UK, but this stuff is already being proposed by Biden here. Take away your gas stove, take away your wood burning stove, take away everything, generators, everything. They want us dependent completely upon electricity when we already don't have enough electricity to go around. They're already creating a bidirectional here flow of energy from those electric cars everyone's supposedly buying. So those batteries get full, and then the electric company decides they need more power. They just start draining your car. So these sensors on every device, I have a hard enough time reading the numbers on my thermostat. So I can't imagine installing smart buttons so that they can do everything in your house. Turn you on, turn you off, turn you down, do whatever you want. The loss of freedom is slowly being hacked at, and they will want to accomplish it. So the conservatives there, the liberal Democrats here, plus the rhinos.
Yes.
And you talked about this bill in there with climate change. I think we talked about a scientist that he said he couldn't get his paper published for Nature magazine. Were we going to do that here?
Yeah, good. That's good. That's good.
Unless he didn't tell the truth, unless he fudged the data, he couldn't get it published. But see, they've been doing this. You know, in the UK, East Anglia University, they are the ones that take all the data from the world, all the temperatures, and then they lie about it, manipulate the data to show it's getting warmer so they can scare everybody. And when they were caught twice, not once, but twice lying about it, they said, oh, it was some one guy, he fudged it and all, but
Lone
it's
wolf.
still going on. And if it's true, why do you need to fudge the data?
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
And why do you need to lie about it?
Yeah, because it's a big scam. Jay, we might get kicked out by saying a scam, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. This is kind of a demonstration of how it works. So let's look at the Republican Party today. For the most part, you will not find amongst the Republican Party. 50 years ago, you would have found marriages between man and a woman. Today, marriage can be between two loving people. 50 years ago, you could find someone in the Conservative Party saying that we need to have fiscal sanity and we need to make sure that the government is not bloated. The right always panders to the left, but the left never panders to the right, which means there is no right or left.
Right.
The conservative Tory party is a farce. It's the same tentacle on the Hydra.
Yes. Two wings of the same dragon. Davey, you got a comment that was pretty good. What was it?
Oh, I just wanted to let everybody know, look here, we're already forced to be on smart meters. And I was just I was just noticing it's the same in the Netherlands. Martin was just saying in the chat, it's the same in the Netherlands. Most people are on smart meters. This happened over 20 years ago where they forced this onto them. The government here has actually got a program at the moment where they'll basically pay for you to install a new hot water service. Again, it's electric, controlled by a smart meter, no gas, hot waters. They're really trying to put, the old saying is you don't put all your eggs in one basket, and that's what they're trying to do. The net zero thing, look, it's unachievable. It's unrealistic. It's just a con. It's a big SEAM. But they're forcing it, and it'll make us all vulnerable to. If you want to take over a country, all you got to do is hit the electrical grid. But they can pretty much control your hot water now if you install one of these new meters. I suggest people hang on to your old one, keep a gas one when you can, because next year here they're going to ban the gas too. Any new homes will not be able to install gas heating, gas appliances, gas hot water. It's all going to be electric, controlled by your smart meters.
Yeah. So what happens when inevitably the Labor Party comes on the scene? It's just going to be accelerated to the nth degree, as you're pointing it out. It's like if the right does it, the left would just do it, without restrictions, and it's going to
without compassion.
Yeah, tyranny.
Almost like the conservatives are laying the foundation for the liberals to build on.
Yeah, that's really.
And then they come back. I didn't know that it was compulsory, Davey, in Australia.
Yeah, we went through that battle about 20 years ago, and there were a lot of people who tried to resist and hang out as long as possible, but eventually, yeah.
Is it punitive? Is it punishable if you don't get one?
I can't remember actually what happened, but they did force it through in the end. So there's no one left hanging out, except for a few people who live off grid. I do know a couple of people who do live off grid, but they're very, very few and far between.
Yeah.
No, I guess Bill Gates did say he is the solution for the problem. I don't know. Maybe we should let him tackle this issue, or he's the source of the problem with this issue. Go ahead, David. We're going to close out.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like they want us to have solar power, and I'm just wondering if I was to install solar power on my house, okay, do I really need their grid, or will they demand that I hook up to the grid so they can use my power? It's like, you kind of wonder, how do you find a way out of this? It's getting so hard, like
the solar power is not really the answer.
Yeah, we're now seeing inflation being imported into countries because of Brits through energy. We're seeing $90 this morning. I saw $90 Brent. I think oil. I think we're going to see $100 oil before long. Which is going to slow travel down even more, slow the economies down. The Fed is driving up the interest rate, talking about doing it even higher here in America, which is going to cause so much downturn in selling houses, which it's already started, as you mentioned a little while ago. That's an old model, of trying to control inflation. And it's like we're run by the Three Stooges, but I don't want to besmirch their good name.
Yeah, don't compare them. It's what a shame.
Maybe Shem.
Maybe.
Yeah, I was reading this article here. I left out the full truth to get my climate change paper published. If you guys want to look that one up, that is a very truthful, heartfelt. Maybe that guy grew a conscience. Maybe that's what happened, because he said, "Look, I had to do it to get published." So David was talking about. I left out the full truth to get my climate change paper published. This is on Nature magazine. So, and by the way, people need therapists now. So if anybody needs a job, climate change therapists are on high demand. So basically, people are getting anxiety, and they're getting, I don't want to, make fun of any suicide or anything like that, but young people are to that level where they need therapy because they've been told the ice caps are going to melt. It's going to be too hot. Hurricanes are coming, and the world's going to end in less than 12 years.
Well, Marco, if I could give some advice to people, I would give the advice that was our slogan when I was young. Question authority. Don't believe them. Question authority. Look at the facts. Read both sides. But because most people are running not on the ability to critical think, they're running on their feelings, and so they're endangering their own lives. And the climate change to me is a transfer of wealth from one generation to the next for something that uses up twice as much of the Earth's resources twice as fast.
Yeah, that's right.
If I could just add to that real quick, David.
Final point.
Final point.
Yeah,
I promise. So to David's point, I would say if you're in your 20s, you should also question everything that comes out of your professor's mouth as well.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's
of course,
it.
You'll get an F in your class, but you'll learn more if you just question authority.
Yeah, trust the scriptures. Trust the scriptures.
That's right.
The scriptures. And if you don't know the God of the scriptures, get to know the God of the scriptures by knowing Jesus Christ. So thank you guys so much for being with us. Thank you those who are commenting. Wonderful comments, wonderful truth. We're going to go to Backstage, and we're going to be talking about well, I'll leave it up to you guys. Well, we're going to be talking about homosexuality and the effect on society, the effect on a particular ex-president that's coming along. And we will be discussing that on Backstage. Send your questions in. We'll take a few questions for David, and then we'll see you guys in a few minutes.
Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide. from the Philippines to Japan, to India to Africa, and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.